Earlier this week, I made a video where I talked about one strategy that folks employ at a protest if there are agent provocateurs, bad actors, instigators, agitators, whatever you want to call them, that come in and try and basically fuck shit up at your protest and get the cops involved. It could be something like violence, right? It could be actually harming other people, or it could be trying to destroy property. Or it could even be something as minimal as trying to get the protesters to trespass on property, or trying to get the protesters to step into the street and block traffic. So one strategy that can be employed at a protest, if someone who is not in your group but is in your proximity is starting to, let's say, for example, take a baseball bat and smash windows, and your nonviolent protest group is concerned that law enforcement might believe that that individual is part of y'all, represents you, and therefore uses the actions of that person to justify brutalizing your whole group. And you want to send a really clear message: they are not with us. One strategy that is employed is that everybody kneels or sits down. So that person's over there smashing shit, and y'all are clearly saying, we're not part of that group. So I was describing that technique in this video and saying, well, that's something you need to decide if your group wants to embrace that strategy and what that might look like, if that's applicable for y'all. But also, like, every single one of us has got to be taking de-escalation training. We've got to be taking activism training and understand not only what we need to do at a protest, but what bad actors might do at a protest and what law enforcement might do at a protest, and how all of those things, end up converging and what kind of response we need to have. And Leah from Indivisible brought this up in the weekly national call this week. And a couple of other folks who are really skilled experts in de-escalation have talked about that specific strategy as well. How when you look at any strategy, there may be reasons to engage in it. And there is also going to be the potential for there to be negative consequences, right? So when you look at that strategy, if everybody kneels, that clearly says, we are not participating in this. We are not in any way associated with that person. It draws a really clear line for the cops. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't negative consequences. And so a couple of folks have brought that up this week. There are reasons that your group might not want to try that tactic. And I want to make sure that I clarify and mention those here. And number one is we want to be aware of any strategies that we're going to employ and how we need to adapt those, or whether they are inclusive at all for people with disabilities and or the elderly, right? Anybody who has limitations that might make it impossible for them to participate in kneeling with the group. You don't want to all kneel and then have, an individual who uses some kind of accessibility device who can't get down on the ground with you. Because then you're communicating to the cops like, this person who's actually with us is not, because they're still standing and we're all kneeling. You don't want to give that false representation. So we want to really design for accessibility. And I think it's always, always, always important, but especially when we are looking at the resistance movement right now. This regime is absolutely targeting people with disabilities, whether it is the cuts to Medicaid, whether it is the eugenicist policies and tactics of RFK Jr., whether it is Trump constantly mocking and ridiculing people with disabilities, this regime no longer offering ASL interpretation. Yeah, like the list is obviously, they are coming for folks who are disabled, because that's how fascist regimes work, right? And especially when we're looking at a technocrat kind of vision that people like Elon Musk have for the future, but also Trump and his kind of dark industrial fantasies as well. If you are not a useful cog in the machine of capitalism, if your worth is not tied to your productivity, then you are expendable to this regime, and they're going to come for you first. That's why they target children. That's why they target disabled folks. That's why they target the elderly and veterans. You are only useful to this regime if you are paying taxes and you are exploitable for your labor. And because of that, we are seeing folks with disabilities show up in very large numbers at our events. And we have got to make sure that we are inclusive of designing not only access to the event itself, but access to the strategies that we use to make sure that folks with disabilities are included and are able to participate fully. So super valid criticism of why you might not want to employ the kneel or sit down technique. And the second one, which I do not expect to be an issue at the vast majority of No King's Day events tomorrow, but is something that we need to plan for and we need to expect. And obviously we're seeing it in LA, we saw it in Portland in 2020, is that law enforcement will use tear gas, right? They will use irritants. And if you're down on the ground and those hit the ground first and they are dense, you are going to be more susceptible. So again, the context of your event really matters. What law enforcement in your area does really matters. What kind of agent provocateur you are having, trying to fuck shit up, really, really matters. There's not a one size fits all solution when we are looking at strategies. You have to make a decision in the moment. So it's really good to educate yourself about all of the possible strategies and say what works in this specific incidence that we are experiencing right now. The last thing, which is really valid, especially when we are looking at some of the incredibly disturbing footage from Los Angeles, is that if you're down on the ground, you are at higher risk of being trampled. And we've seen at least two instances in LA where mounted officers have intentionally run over downed, unarmed protesters with their horses. So again, I just want to encourage folks, we all need to have a really steep learning curve here. We have got to take the responsibility for educating ourselves, getting the training that will help us be really skilled. We are having to basically build a whole set of skills very, very rapidly. And the way these protests may be looking in the coming months may be substantially different than they looked on April 5th. And so we're going to have to acquire skills and be practiced at decision making in those events. So thank you for letting me have a chance to clarify. And I don't want folks to take any advice that I have and say this is uniformly applicable everywhere, because your group knows what your community looks like, right? In permaculture, we focus very much on site-specific design. There's not one size fits all garden plan for every location, every individual gardener, no matter what your needs are, no matter what your dietary preferences are, no matter what your climate is, no matter what your physical limitations are. No, we focus on site-specific design where you are thinking about the location where you are growing food, and you are thinking about the person who is growing and harvesting and consuming that food, and you make a unique plan. And so I really, really want to encourage folks, get national training, right? Engage in all of the training, learn all of the skills, and then you have this repertoire that you are able in the moment to decide, how do we employ this in a way that's going to be most effective, that's going to protect lives, keep people safe, and help us get our message across, help us be effective at the protests today. So other strategies I have seen for dealing with agent provocateurs like that, if law enforcement is coming in, is that everybody turns around and gives that person their back. Everybody just does their best to move away from them. And I know, again, are the police trying to kettle you? Are you able to actually get away? Your group, though, needs to make sure that you are crafting plans for these situations. I'm on the safety team for our local Indivisible chapter, and we just had a planning meeting and went over a whole bunch of skills that we all need to really absorb and be able to recall at a moment's notice. And I know that training is going to be ongoing, and I know that it's not necessarily just up to the individual leaders of various grassroots groups, whatever chapter you're in. It's incumbent upon us as individuals to get that training very, very swiftly and to practice using it, to game out scenarios, to run those scenarios, so that in the moment when everything's really scary and the stakes are really high, that we are able to draw up those strategies, right? We're able to pull them up and employ them. So I don't know if there are specific strategies that you like, or also if there are specific de-escalation and effective protester trainings that you particularly like. I know some are better than others. There are tons of them online. 5051 has one, Indivisible has one, ACLU has one. Actually, if you're watching this on YouTube, I will drop a bunch in the video description, because now is a good time for all of us to get educated. But thanks for giving me the opportunity here to clarify, and y'all stay safe tomorrow.